Misprints. Pre-title sequence, exterior jetty, lock, Scotland, dawn. Richard, early 20s, stands at the landward end of a jetty, looking towards mist-covered water. We hear the distant thud-thud of party music. He is disheveled, drunk, and soul-crushed. An idea occurs to him, and he takes off his clothes. He breaks into a run and launches himself into the air with a defiant shout. Too late, he realizes there are large inflatable bananas of the type that are dragged behind speedboats, tethered to the jetty. He hits one and is flung back painfully onto the jetty. Front titles. Exterior, Richard and Ollie's flat, East London, early morning. A shabby townhouse on a freezing winter's morning. Jutting from the frame of an upstairs window is a flat for sale sign. Interior, living room, kitchenette, Richard and Ollie's flat, morning. On a windowsill, a blue bottle lies dead. Interior, Richard's bedroom, morning. A man, Richard, lies corpse-like, wrapped in a discolored duvet. A pale, lifeless foot protrudes. Interior, bathroom, morning. In the bath, Ollie, early 20s, scrubs himself vigorously. He flips a rubber duck with his foot, then waters the houseplant using a shampoo lid. He hears a faint duck quack. He glances at the toy duck, then looks up. Through a grubby window, he catches sight of a one-duck fly-past. He struggles to open the frosted-up window. It gives with a jerk, blackening his face with London grime. Interior, living room, kitchen, morning. A thoroughly lived-in living room with a kitchenette. Ollie, with his towel wrapped around his waist, hurriedly grabs a manuscript from the sofa. As he exits, he stumbles into a walking stick, which clatters to the ground. He kicks it furiously aside and seems to be seized with a new determination. Interior, corridor, morning. Ollie impatiently raps on a door.
Rich!
No answer. He enters the other bedroom. We glimpse books and potted herbs. Interior, Ollie's bedroom, morning. Ollie is now dressed in an eccentric brown woolen suit, checked shirt, and odd tie. He inhales the scent from one of his herb plants, transporting himself momentarily to a bucolic idyll. It calms him, but then he sees the manuscript and it infuriates him. He grabs it, checks his watch. Interior, corridor, morning. Ollie raps on the door and enters without waiting for an answer. Interior, Richard's bedroom, continuous. Ollie penetrates the gloom, advancing deep into the lair of a hibernating hermit. He peers at the sleeping form on the bed, then glances around. He spies a dark shadow on the ceiling. He frowns, approaching it, stepping on a ratty polar bear rug. A groan emanates from the duvet.
I left the water in. A nice hot bath will wake you up.
He is interrupted by a languorous voice, thick with sleep.
You want me to dunk myself in your spunk broth, then sit about like a nice bum?
Ollie clambers onto a chest of drawers.
I haven't been in here for ages. What's this?
Richard's face appears, stubbly, a cheek creased by sleep, a twist of tissue protruding from a nostril. Though only a few years older than when he was on the jetty, he seems prematurely dried up and defeated. He sees Ollie examining the black mold, scratching it.
If you feel the need to get close to it, do it when I'm out.
You're never out.
The chest of drawers shakes unsteadily.
For God's sake, we're going to lose our deposit. It's thriving. It's more alive than you are.
Well, let's get some rent off it.
Ollie reaches out too far and loses his grip. He falls and lands clumsily, careening into a chair and upsetting a half-eaten plate of cold spaghetti bolognese onto the polar bear rug. He holds up the manuscript as he heads to the door.
I'm taking this. The Queen Mom.
No, don't.
You blew it. Deadline's tomorrow.
Ollie exits. Richard clambers out of bed in boxer briefs and an old pajama top. Interior, stairway, continuous. Ollie descends the stairs in a furious hurry. Richard appears behind him, tissue still protruding, limping heavily.
That's the only thing keeping me alive.
An old lady, Mrs. Tidman, opens the door on a lower landing, summoned by the commotion. Her dachshund, Pencil, starts barking and follows Richard. Ollie reaches his bike in the hallway with its fixed basket. He maneuvers it out the door.
It's okay, you've clearly retired.
It's just such tosh.
There's worse ways to make a living than sitting on your ass reading books.
He exits with the bike. Richard and Pencil follow. Exterior, street, outside Ollie and Richard's flat, morning, continuous. In the morning frost, Ollie clambers onto his bicycle. The limping Richard and the barking Pencil follow.
Look, Ollie, I'll proof the Queen Mum, okay? If you want it, I'll exhume her and proof the gin in her tubes. Please.
Ollie relents. He hands Richard the manuscript before cycling off. Richard is so cold he fumbles it. Pages scatter. He starts to retrieve them, and Pencil playfully tugs at the pages in his hand. Pages retrieved, Richard approaches the front door. It is locked. He presses a buzzer, shivering.
Mrs. Tidman?
No answer.
Mrs. Tidman, it's freezing.
He looks down and sees Pencil looking up at him. He picks Pencil up.
Mrs. Tidman, I have Pencil. I have Pencil and he is freezing.
The buzzer goes, and he opens the door. He sees the passerby staring at him and becomes aware of the tissue in his nose. He unravels it and blows his nose. Exterior, street, outside Ernst & Mather Publishing Office. Morning. Ollie cycles precariously through snarled-up traffic, angry cab drivers, and trucks belching noxious fumes. He steers into a bicycle parking bay by offices. Interior conference room, Ernst & Mather Day. A steely-eyed senior publishing executive, Janet Webb, is seated with a woman, Sarah, in her early 30s. Sarah is tired and stressed. They are looking at mock-ups for the cover of Carrie, Having It Large, the autobiography of an orange-tanned, breast-enhanced female reality TV star. Janet is staring at the trashy images as though the future of the Western world depended on them. Sarah surreptitiously glances at her smartphone, checking for messages.
I need something that says, yes, I was a co-core, yes, the sex tape was disgusting, yes, I've brought some shame on the very concept of womanhood, but my tits are massive, I've got the tan, the teeth, the twat of a husband, and you can all go fuck yourselves.
There is a knock on the door.
Come.
Ollie enters holding a manuscript. Janet gestures for him to wait. He stands admiring Sarah as they wait for inspiration to strike Janet. Sarah again checks her phone, ignoring Ollie.
I've got it.
Both Sarah and Ollie jump at this sudden ejaculation. Sarah drops her phone.
A bottle of bubbly literally ejaculating over her cleavage. Stella McCartney dress, orgasm, face, set up a shoot, get everything sponsored.
Ollie chivalrously picks up Sarah's phone and hands it to her with a smile. She suddenly realizes that he fancies her and is infuriated.
What do you want?
Flustered, Ollie takes a moment to remember why he came into the room. Then he sees a manuscript in his hands.
Are you sure you want me to reject this art of longevity?
Art of what?
Dr. Rufus Zahn, art of...
Yes, of course.
But...
A word of advice on the slush pile. If you insist on reading the bloody thing, do it on your own time. Reject it quickly on our time.
Yes, sorry.
Never apologize in a business environment.
She turns suddenly to Sarah, who is again glancing at her phone.
Look, he's not going to call, okay? Or text or Snapchat or whatever it is urban ape men don't do these days after you've handed them your pussy on a plate.
I did not.
Of course you did. Now we've got this launch bearing down on us, so cancel everything in your life. And I don't care what time of the month it is. Whack in a snatch cigar and get on with it.
Interior, living room, kitchen. Richard and Ollie's flat, morning. In a worn dressing gown and ratty woolen hat, Richard is standing at the stove, finishing collating the dog-chewed manuscript. The polar bear rug hangs from a light-fitting, head-down, drip-drying.
The lady who would become the nation's favourite grandmother was born to a family of...
He grabs a pen from his pocket and deftly corrects the double of with the appropriate proofreader's delete. The kettle boils and Richard removes an earthenware teapot from the hob and spoons in loose tea leaves. He pours in boiling water and slips a cozy over the pot. He looks at his watch, timing his tea. Interior, bullpens, Ernst & Mather, morning. Ollie sits in his bullpen with its pictures of ponds by Henry Thoreau. He is reading Dr. Zahn's manuscript, The Art of Longevity. Around him, other young employees look a lot sharper as they multitask on their devices. Sarah walks past. She glances at Ollie, then pauses and looks at him again. She has become curious about him, but she puts on her most brisk and professional persona.
Why are you bothering with that manure?
Ollie is delighted that she's deigning to speak to him.
Dr. Zahn is really famous.
Where's the Queen Mum blog you sent out for proofing?
It's coming.
Sarah examines his curious little domain. She can't help the slightest hint of flirtatiousness creeping in.
You'd better not be using friends to proofread. That's against policy.
Janet bustles past them.
Sarah, no flirting with the bottom feeders. And your FaceTime stays on, okay? I want to feed ideas in as they come to me. If your phone goes straight to message, I'll take a shit in your head.
Janet exits. Sarah exits into her office looking stressed. On Ollie's computer screen, we see, insert computer screen website, a publicity shot of a male author, Dr. Zahn, in the 1970s. He has a wicked glint in his eye, bristles with sexual charisma, and is at a book signing attended by women in caftan dresses. The caption reads, insert caption, Dr. Zahn roadshow storms London as sexual healing tops New York Times bestseller chart. Interior, living room, kitchen, Richard and Ollie's flat, day. Richard sits in his armchair with a board across his lap. He raises a distinctive chipped china teacup to his lips and sips. It is the nectar of the gods. He takes up the manuscript, but is distracted by voices. He walks to the window, opens it, and leans out. Below, a man in his late 20s is locking an immaculate sob. This is Nick Bragg, self-assured, handsome, alpha male. A shabby man, Roger, the landlord, greets him. Richard is horrified to see these people. They look up towards Richard's window, and he withdraws into the room unseen. He hears the sound of the door opening downstairs, feet on the stairs, male voices approaching. Richard pours his tea into a potted plant, turns off the radio, and glances about in desperation. He opens several cupboards before settling on one in the kitchenette with a slatted front. He clambers in, shuts it behind him. There is a knock on the door, the jangle of keys.
It's all right. They've agreed to let me show people around.
A key is inserted. Nick and Roger enter. Roger looks disgustedly at the dripping polar bear rug, the squalor.
It doesn't present as well as it should on account of the scumbags.
Nick starts to look about the flat.
Was it to live in yourself or you buy to let?
In the cupboard, Richard waits, not daring to breathe. Through the slatted front, he sees a photograph. It shows Richard and Ollie together in a pub. Interior, Richard's bedroom, continuous. Nick enters with Roger.
Probably rented out.
He looks up at the ceiling and sees the black mold. Interior, living room, kitchen, continuous. Nick re-enters and walks over to the kitchenette. He starts to methodically open all the cupboards. In his cupboard, Richard winds his finger around the catch, holding the door shut. Expensive watch glittering, Nick attempts to open Richard's cupboard, tugging at it.
Perhaps it's warped. I noticed the damp.
Richard takes Nick's place at the cupboard. He gives a hard pull and it fails to open it. Inside the cupboard, Richard's eyes water with pain. He suppresses a whimper of agony.
There was a leak in the roof, but we've just redone it. I'll take you up and show you.
I'm illegally parked.
They give up on the cupboard. Nick glances into the bathroom, then walks towards the exit. They are about to leave when Nick spies the photograph of Richard and Ollie.
Good God, that's Richard Drake. Does he live here?
Inside the cupboard, Richard reacts.
You know him, do you?
What's he up to these days?
He's usually lounging about here.
Nick examines the manuscript on the armchair, seeing the proofreader symbols.
Poor old Richard.
He and Roger exit. Exterior, street, London, early evening, traveling. On his bike, Ollie weeps through the traffic and exhaust fumes. A cab driver yells abuse at him for cutting him up. Interior, downstairs hallway, Richard and Ollie's flat, early evening. Ollie parks his bike and mounts the narrow stairs. Interior, living room, kitchen, early evening. Ollie enters. Richard is seated at an old computer, getting increasingly frustrated.
Hello Magazine rang. They're doing a photo feature called Bedrooms of the Unfucked.
I'm in.
Richard types something and presses return.
Bastard neighbours have changed the Wi-Fi password.
He gives up. He stands and walks into the tiny bathroom. He leaves the door open. Interior, bathroom, living room, kitchenette, early evening. Richard grotesquely starts preening in front of the small mirror over the sink. He is unshaven. His hair is greasy, and he is still in his dressing gown. It is not clear to what end.
Your lot publish self-help books, don't they? What do they say you have to do to achieve success?
Ollie glances at him preening, frowns, then walks over and picks up the Queen Mum manuscript.
Tell me you've finished this.
Stick to the subject. Success. What's the secret? I saw a successful man today. Thought I might give it a go.
They generally say you need to have an image in your head of what you want.
Richard exits the bathroom.
An image.
It's called visualization.
So, what's your image?
Ollie ponders. He walks over to the window. It looks out on an urban bleakness, but he is exploring the landscape of his mind.
All these books passing through your hands, all saying you need an image and you haven't cobbled one together.
Okay, I have, but it's ridiculous. I'm living in a shack by a pond. What about you? Got an image?
Well, obviously, I'm having medical grade sex with Jess.
Oh, Jessica, I should have guessed.
Ollie exits to the bathroom and slams the door.
It's annoying, I know. I live in the permafrost of disappointment.
How nice for you.
Interior living room kitchen, Richard and Ollie's flat, night. Richard and Ollie are having a meat-heavy TV dinner and watching a nature program. Ollie reads Dr. Zahn's manuscript. The TV image distracts him, a floating ball of male toads, all clinging to a single female. It puts him off his food.
Who was this successful man?
Jessica's boyfriend. He came to look at the flat.
Ollie is shocked.
Jessica's boyfriend was here.
It's alright. It was just a random piece of unpleasantness.
Interior bullpens, Ernst made their day. At his desk, Ollie is absorbed in The Art of Longevity by Dr. Rufus Zahn. Sarah walks past his bullpen, answering a call on her cell.
Hello? What's up, hun? Oh, God, it's Sam's hen night, isn't it? Bugger, is it really tonight?
Ollie is unable to read on and listens in.
No, I'm not bringing him. Don't mention him, he's unmentionable. Poison. What's the venue? Pelican? You silly bitch, I said don't mention him. No, he didn't call. See you later, hun. Kiss, kiss.
Interior kitchen, living room, Richard and Ollie's flat, early evening. Ollie enters and finds Richard asleep on the sofa. He unloads fresh fruit, vegetables, and chamomile tea from his rucksack. Richard wakes and observes Ollie for a beat.
Men's Health magazine rang. They want an article from you. I wanked my testicles inside out. Halfpence a word. Deadline's in 5 minutes.
Can't do it. I've sold the rights to,
I've got it. Ladies' Home Journal. The ball sack issue.
That's the one.
Ollie exits. Richard gets to his feet and stretches. Interior corridor, Ollie's bedroom, early evening. Ollie is tending to his herbs, communing in his own little way with nature. Richard's head emerges into the corridor, peering at him. He is seeking attention.
Did you know that 7% of the world is drunk?
Ollie rolls his eyes, frowns. He is irritated that his moment of peace is interrupted.
I'm sorry?
Richard steps fully into the corridor, thinking he has successfully instigated a chat.
I heard it on the radio.
Yeah, well, London's plagued by alcohol poisoning.
He walks along the corridor and exits to the living room. Interior living room kitchen continuous. Ollie approaches the kitchenette. He grabs Richard's favorite cup.
Tea?
Richard follows him in and reaches out to take the cup from Ollie, who yanks it back and starts filling the kettle.
I'm not making your fusspot tea. I was going to make chamomile.
It's lucky I stopped you.
Tea has caffeine in it. That's a stimulant. The nervous system...
Richard snatches his cup off Ollie.
Proper tea is one of the very few things that gives me pleasure. So could we just leave it alone, please? What are we having?
Steamed veg.
Richard looks horrified. Ollie flicks the kettle on.
I'm reading a manuscript, The Art of Longevity, by Dr. Rufus Zahn.
Penis enlargement without the pain.
Ollie enters the bathroom and shuts the door. Interior, bathroom, living room, kitchenette, continuous. Ollie stands having a pee.
He's an eminent Taoist. Hasn't touched alcohol since he was 30. Lives on fresh fruit, steamed veg, rice and fish. He has sexual intercourse between 3 and 5 times a day. Says it's healthy if you don't ejaculate.
Richard is visibly shocked at this horrible thought.
You mean we can't even have one off the wrist?
Ollie moves to the tiny sink and washes his hands.
Well, I can, but you're a bit older, so you shouldn't. Dr. Zahn has acquired a technique that allows him to climax without ejaculating.
Ollie exits. Interior, living room, kitchen, continuous. He walks over to the kitchenette and starts chopping vegetables vigorously. Richard ponders Zahn's fiendish theory, genuinely impressed.
Too knackered to come, so he builds a new philosophy around it. I'm in awe of the man.
This exasperates Ollie. He slams down the knife.
Look, I'm going out later to a hen night.
Richard is intrigued. The words hen night speak to him.
But you wouldn't be interested because of your permafrost.
Young women fired up on cocktails, playing with plastic cocks. I am interested.
Interior, Pelican Bar, East London night. Women in a hen party are necking cocktails. Sarah is amongst them, though she seems bored and drunk. Ollie and Richard enter and approach the bar. Richard has shaved, put on a jacket, and attempted to brush his hair. He uses his walking cane. Ollie, wearing another of his eccentric woolen suits, spies Sarah, who is checking her smartphone.
Scrumpy Jack topped up with your strongest lager. Pints. That'll undo your top button for under £3.
Why do we have to get drunk to do something as natural as seeking a mate?
Because it requires poise, charm, and confidence, none of which we possess.
Sarah approaches Ollie unsteadily.
What the buggery are you doing here?
Ollie turns and finds Sarah standing behind him. He pretends to be surprised to see her. She is too tipsy to notice that he is a terrible liar.
Oh, hi. This is my local, so, I practically live here. What are you doing here?
We need men. Come.
She walks away. The same later. Ollie sits next to Sarah, who, loosened up by alcohol, is surprised to find herself attracted to Ollie.
I know what you put me in mind of. Some sort of 19th century idealist. Henry David Thoreau.
You've read Thoreau?
Civil disobedience. Recipe for bloody anarchy.
I just love that he was the first person to say, hey, all this technology is great, but remember when we lived in the woods and we used to smile? You should feel deep unease about
I
it.
tell you what I'm feeling deep unease about. I'll only say this once. Get out of Ernst and Mather. Run for the hills before you become contaminated by the marketing and targeting and making everything as moronic as possible. I mean, look at me. This only took 5 years.
You had ideals once?
I wanted to be a writer. Had that shit kicked out of me years ago.
Richard sits at the edge of the hen party, sipping his pint and looking self-conscious. A woman, Fee, sits next to him and glances at his cane. She is in her late 20s, self-assured and a little off the wall.
What happened to the leg?
Richard examines her. He is intrigued. This is no wank fantasy bimbo. This is a real person. He puts up his automatic defenses, talking bullshit.
Skydiving, safari,
She takes him at face value.
Skydiving, safari, and...
baboon attack.
Fee is amused, but at the same time disappointed. She is genuinely curious about him.
You don't want to tell me.
I'll listen to your medical history for a Guinness and Bale's depth charge.
Fee decides to play ball, entering the ping-pong game of banter.
Well, I've got this pain in my shoulder. Drives me nuts.
Richard drops his head to the table and pretends to be asleep, snoring noisily.
People love medical histories. The Daily Mail pay handsomely for them.
At last, Richard is prepared to just talk. He likes her.
You're a journalist.
Been nibbling that shrinking pie, yes?
Richard's eye is suddenly caught by a woman with blonde hair seated up at the bar, her face turned away from him. The sight mesmerizes him, but Fee hasn't yet noticed.
Sad to say, but that dream's looking peaky about the gills. And the Uncle's Lettings Agency in Kidderminster is starting to look positively glamorous.
Her voice fades out. Richard is paying no attention to her and stands, as though in a dream. He walks towards a woman.
Jess.
The woman ignores him, and he raises his hand. He touches her shoulder lightly.
Jess.
Startled, the woman turns to him. She has a plain, hard face. Richard snaps out of his dream and backs away. He exits the bar.
What was all that about?
Nothing. Do you want another drink?
Fee looks baffled and disappointed. Interior, Ollie's bedroom, Richard and Ollie's flat, night. Ollie and Sarah are giggling together as they tumble onto Ollie's single bed. They kiss drunkenly. Interior, Richard's bedroom, continuous. Richard, lying in bed, hears laughter, sighs, bed springs, etc. from Ollie's room. He bashes on the wall. Interior bathroom, morning. Ollie is cheerfully brushing his teeth. The door bursts open. Sarah stumbles in. Ollie, his toothbrush still in his mouth, swiftly catches her and cradles her in his arms. He holds her hair up as she throws up. When she has finished, he gently wipes her mouth. Sarah sighs and props her head against him.
Oh, God, you're sweet, aren't you?
Ollie strokes her head, and she pushes his hand away. Interior, Sarah's office, Ernst and Mather, day. Sarah enters her office looking a little worse for wear. She finds a little bunch of wildflowers in a glass. She walks over to them, picks them up. Her desk phone rings.
It's me.
Sarah doesn't reply.
I feel like running naked through the woods.
She hangs up the phone. At his desk, Ollie reacts to the phone being hung up. He reverts his attention to a letter he is writing. We see these words. Insert email close-up. Dear Dr. Zahn, we regret we are unable to publish. Interior, Richard's bedroom. Richard and Ollie's flat, early evening. Richard lies on his bed, laid out like a corpse, staring sightlessly at the ceiling. Ollie enters. He sees Richard is in a bad way, but decides to ignore it.
Sunday Times style section called. They want you for the cover. Apparently living in your own shit is the new black.
No reaction. Ollie idly moves across to Richard's bookshelf and starts looking at the titles.
I've managed to get you more time on the Queen Mum. You know, I can't sub you on the rent. I can barely pay it myself.
Maybe I could do the proofreading on this new book. The one about vegetables and not wanking.
It's been rejected. Wrote the letter myself. We regret we cannot publish as we are only interested in celebrities, ideally with Class A drug problems so bad it has dissolved part of their face.
Well, why not publish it yourself?
Continued. As Richard is saying this, Ollie moves along Richard's bookcase. Morning sunshine lights up his head. His foot comes to rest inside the open jaw of the polar bear rug, which is scrunched up by the wall.
The bloke is grey-haired and fucking. That's gotta be worth a few sales.
That's not a bad idea.
The polar bear head grips his foot as he spins around, suddenly overcome with a burst of energetic optimism. He falls forward onto the bed, breaking his fall with his elbows, which slam into Richard's legs.
Hey, I could really do it. Rich, this could be brilliant.
Ah! All right, I said publish it. I didn't say anything about enthusiasm.
Ollie exits, his mind firing on all cylinders. Interior, conference room, bullpens, office, Ernst and Mather, day. Sarah exits the conference room, holding a large cardboard cutout of Carly, laughing and opening a bottle of champagne. She passes Ollie, who is seated at his desk writing an email. Insert email. Dear Dr. Zahn, I wanted to suggest an alternative idea regarding your manuscript. Interior, Sarah's office, continuous. Sarah enters her office and stops abruptly on seeing another simple, unpretentious bunch of flowers. She turns and sees Ollie smiling. She softens slightly. Her phone emits a grating electronic sound. Interior, living room, kitchenette, Richard and Ollie's flat, night. Ollie serves up vegetables and rice. Richard watches a news item about urban murder and neglect.
No word back.
Son, give him a chance. He's got an awful lot of boning to fit into his day.
Ollie brings 2 plates of food over. Richard stands and takes his food from Ollie. As he does, he glances out of the window. We see Sarah standing on the pavement below.
Isn't that your woman?
Ollie stops watching the news and moves to the window. Exterior, street, night. Ollie bursts out of the apartment and runs to Sarah. He grabs her and kisses her, and she kisses him back.
You are not to enter my orbit at work. Utter one word about this in the office and your testicles are pulped.
Interior, Ollie's bedroom, Richard and Ollie's flat, night. Ollie and Sarah are cheerfully and noisily having sex. Interior, Richard's bedroom, continuous. Richard lies with his pillow wrapped tight around his head. He bashes on the wall. Interior, living room, kitchenette, morning. Sarah is wearing Ollie's dressing gown. She sits on the sofa while Ollie searches the fridge and cupboards.
What's wrong with your flatmate?
He's alright. He's just a bit of a case. I've got to pop out.
He exits, but Sarah is clearly not satisfied. Interior, stairway, continuous. Ollie descends the stairs. Sarah has followed him.
You can't say that and then leave me alone with him.
Ollie pauses on the stairs.
He's completely harmless. This girl broke his heart when he was a student. He thought he saw her in that bar.
What's wrong with his leg?
I used to ask, but I stopped because the answers were doing my head in.
He continues to descend the stairs. Interior, living room, kitchenette, morning. Sarah is drinking from Richard's favorite teacup. Richard enters, sleep crumpled. He freezes on seeing that she is drinking from his precious cup.
Morning.
Richard grunts and walks over to the kitchenette. He flicks on the kettle and puts his teapot on the hob.
I'd offer you a full English, but Ollie's fallen under the spell of a vegetarian tyrant.
You mean Dr. Zahn?
He begins his precise tea-making ceremony.
You're not actually imprisoned in a vegan concentration camp.
No answer.
Are you turning the tea?
It has to be made properly, according to laws laid down by George Orwell. I'll make you a fresh cup.
He holds out his hand for his teacup. She indicates that she is still drinking.
You left a bit suddenly the other night. Ollie said...
What did Ollie say? Bless his little face.
He said you mistook that blonde at the bar for your ex.
Richard feels cornered, starts to exit, then exhaustion overwhelms him and he sits.
She was on my mind.
Why don't you do something to get over her? Join the Foreign Legion. Open a hedgehog sanctuary.
Richard switches on the television. Saturday morning chit-chat.
So I noticed this place is for sale. Does that mean you're about to be turfed out?
Ollie's sorting out a new place.
Sarah raises an eyebrow at this. Her smartphone starts emitting its irritating noise. Interior, exterior, montage sequence. Ollie and Sarah make love at night. Ollie and Sarah share a secret smile at the office. In his bedroom, Richard tries to block out the noise with his pillow. He bangs on the wall and a picture falls on him. In the bathroom, Richard tries to find his toothbrush amongst the feminine creams, makeup, tampons, etc. on the shelves. Interior, stairs, hallway. Ollie and Richard's flat, morning. Sarah and Ollie descend the stairway dressed for work. Ollie guides his bicycle towards the front door.
Queen Mum,
patting his bag.
Got it.
it's a week late. I had to take a bullet for that bum. You've got to stop using him for proofreading.
He'd die. He'd be found curled up like a dead spider.
Her smartphone buzzes and she takes it out of her bag as she exits. He sees a handwritten envelope addressed to himself. Interior, Richard's bedroom, morning. Richard is asleep. Ollie enters with a letter and shakes Richard's shoulder. Richard opens his eyes.
What is it?
It's a letter from Dr. Zahn. Wants to know more about my imprint, what books I've published, sales figures.
So, presumably that's the end of it.
Ollie's enthusiasm evaporates. He refolds the letter.
Yes, I suppose it is. But just shows, doesn't it? What you could do if you were a bit sort of iffy.
Interior, living room, kitchenette. Richard and Ollie's flat, late afternoon. Richard, dressing gown, woolen hat, takes a fresh cup of tea and sits in the armchair. Exterior, street, outside Richard and Ollie's flat, late afternoon. Nick is parking his Saab. Jessica, an elegantly dressed, beautiful woman in her late 20s, is in the passenger seat. They exit the car and approach the door to Ollie and Richard's building. The landlord, Roger, appears and shakes their hands. Interior, living room, kitchenette, Richard and Ollie's flat, late afternoon. Richard is about to sip his tea. He hears the downstairs door open. He stands. He hears a female voice, Jessica. He pours his tea into the plant pot and limps over to the slatted cupboard. It is full of bags of fruit and vegetables. He tries to empty it so he can climb in, but he spills a bag. Apples, grapefruits, a cabbage roll out. A knock. Richard tries to tidy up. A key turns in the lock. The landlord enters with Nick and Jessica. Jessica's tone is light and bantering, but she is surprised by Richard's down-at-heel appearance. Richard is in a state of shock. He keeps glancing at Jessica, then looking quickly away as he tries to figure out how to behave.
Sorry, thought you were out.
I'll give you a quid for the whole place.
Richard grabs at this. He can hide behind banter, but it comes out a bit forced.
Make it a fiver. He'll cork up his peephole in the bathroom. Hello, Jess.
They kiss each other on the cheek. She gives him a hug, but he pulls away. Nick holds out his hand.
You remember Nick?
Richard looks at the hand of his rival, his nemesis. There's an awkward moment, but Richard rallies himself, decides to put on an act, shakes the hand.
Of course. Good old Nick.
Richard, great to see you again.
You're not making him homeless.
We're not renewing the tenancy.
Oh, God, don't worry about me. I'm only living in this squalor, with my flat in Hoxton Square being done up.
He's found his tone, he's on a roll.
Hoxton Square, someone's done well.
What business are you in?
My main money comes from a bit of publishing, actually.
Publishing.
We run a little boutique publishing outfit here.
Under the terms of your tenancy,
This irritating interjection is shot down aggressively.
Yes, well, we're moving out now, aren't we? So the whole hideous scandal can come out.
Any authors I've heard of?
Nick's a buyer for Lincoln's. You know the mega bookshops with the cafes?
Richard manages to swagger about the small room as though it were the boardroom of great publishing house.
We've recently signed up Dr. Rufus Zahn. We're repackaging him as a longevity guru.
He picks up a piece of paper, pretends it's an important business letter.
Zahn, that rings a bell.
Richard takes a pen and writes a note on the letter, as though he were doing important work.
He did very well with a sexy book on Taoism.
Sexual healing. We were still stalking it a few years back. He's still alive.
Richard pretends to be so amused by the absurdity of the question that he abandons a letter.
Alive, fit as a racing greyhound.
Richard pretends to be in an expansive, generous mood, letting Nick and Jessica in on an important trade secret about the hidden whereabouts of publishing gold.
We're calling it Live Longest. How to outlive your wife and have the last laugh. It's crude, but at the same time it's so hot you need to be wearing asbestos underpants just to hear about it.
Jessica laughs, and her laughter startles Richard. Nick has been caught up in Richard's act.
I can see it on the counter by their tills. Novelty gift for the over 50s. Might even get younger men buying it. Jess, I'm going up to check the roof. Do you want to stay here and catch up with Richard?
Nick and the landlord exit. Richard is slighted, exhausted from the effort of bullshitting. Left alone with Jessica, feeling exposed, he hides behind his computer.
Feel free to have a look around. Monster deadline.
She pokes her head into the bathroom, but is more interested in observing Richard. She stares at him openly, making a joke out of it, folding her arms and leaning against the doorway.
You look like a cat that's been kept in a box.
That's exactly the look I'm going for.
My God, I think you're still annoyed with me. For being a thoughtless, heartless bitch 100 years ago.
It wasn't that long ago.
We were practically children, teenagers.
Exactly, and that's what teenagers do, dicing and slicing.
Jessica suddenly sees Richard's distinctive teacup. She is amazed and walks over and picks it up.
Didn't I?
Yes, you gave it to me.
We hear footsteps descending from above. Nick and the landlord enter.
Listen, Richard, we have to get going, but I'd like to talk to you about Live Longest.
Sorry?
Maybe you could let us have the book before anyone else. We could guarantee a certain number of sales, say 30,000.
He hands Richard his business card.
Give me a call.
Goodbye, Richard.
Nick, Jessica, and the landlord exit. Richard walks into the middle of the room. He lies on his back on the floor, staring upwards. Exterior street outside Ollie and Richard's flat, late afternoon. As Nick, Jessica, and the landlord depart, Ollie arrives on his bicycle. Interior kitchen, living room, Richard and Ollie's flat, late afternoon. Richard lies on the floor. Ollie enters.
Richard,
Richard remains inert. Ollie walks over to him and squats down.
what happened?
Did you know that if you eat a polar bear's liver, it will kill you stone dead? Literally fell you like an ox. I heard it on the radio. She was here, Ollie. I didn't dream it. I can still smell her perfume. Cool Indifference by Givenchy.
Ollie looks confused.
Let's share a bottle of scotch.
Ollie moves to the kitchen and starts preparing tea.
I'm proposing it on humanitarian grounds.
Alcohol's not going to do your leg any good.
I don't need my legs. They're a remnant from an earlier incarnation when I gave a fuck.
Look, for Christ's sakes, you've got to stop marinating in self-pity like this. It's so incredibly unhealthy.
Richard isn't listening. He gets to his feet and walks towards the exit.
Richard, drinking a bottle of scotch is not an option for you right now.
Why not?
Sarah and I, we're thinking of getting a place, so you need to get your act together.
Richard looks shocked, but he quickly hides it. Ollie looks guilty at having delivered a bombshell.
I mean, obviously, if you need any help finding a place...
God, I'll be fine.
His eyes settle on the manuscript for Dr. Zahn's book. He picks it up.
Do you mind if I read this?
Interior bookstores, Ernst & Mather Day. Boxes and shelves are packed with showbiz biographies and self-help books. Ollie and Sarah are having a quickie. Sarah still wearing a jacket and with her skirt hitched up. As Ollie reaches a climax, trashy celebrity biographies rain down on them. He gets his breath back.
I thought I wasn't meant to enter your orbit at work.
Sarah starts to giggle. Ollie, realizing what he has said, giggles too. They stop and hold each other.
So how am I shaping up? I mean, you know, sexually.
Sarah starts to get up and adjusts her clothes.
Well, it's all over a bit too quickly, but I think that's just your gender. No, honestly, you're improving. Really.
Thanks. I'm learning a lot from Dr. Zahn's book.
Oh, God. Please spare me, Dr. Zahn.
What do you mean?
Look, I'm not a fan, okay? I had to deal with him when I was first worked here.
Deal with him how?
We were going to publish something. The manuscript was hopeless. He wouldn't change a word. Janet asked me to soften him up, but he spent the whole time trying to get into my knickers.
Ollie can't help being amused.
It's not funny. The old goat should be locked up.
Oh, I sort of offered to help him with his new book.
Help him how?
I mean, help him publish it as a sort of project on my own.
Sarah is surprised. For a moment, she is impressed, seeing a new dynamic side to Ollie.
It's alright, it's not happening. I wanted to know about my imprint, sales figures and all that, so...
So you just gave up?
Sarah, you just said...
It's alright. It's just
What?
nothing.
Exterior, Cafe, East London, early evening. Richard sits by the window eating cake and reading Zahn's manuscript. He bursts out laughing. His mood is ebullient. Ollie and Sarah walk past. Ollie sees him and does a double take. They enter the cafe. Interior, Cafe, early evening. Ollie and Sarah approach Richard and join him at the table. Ollie sees that he is reading Zahn's book. Richard bursts out laughing again, his face stuffed with cake.
He's having a go at John Lennon. How are steamed vegetables meant to stop you from being shot?
Ollie yanks the manuscript away from him.
It's not meant to be funny.
I think it could be a cult classic. What's more, I've pre-sold it to Lincoln's. You know the book shops with the cafes?
What? What's he talking about?
They want to stock it before other bookshops. Only 30,000 copies initially.
He hands Nick's business card to Sarah.
Jessica's boyfriend is a buyer for Lincoln's. I fed him a sales pitch.
Sarah hands a card to Ollie.
Live longest. How to outlive your wife and have the last laugh. The man got a hard-on about it, practically jetted off in his pants.
It's actually quite good. Under all that mould and mildew, there's a lively mind going to waste.
Isn't it a bit trashy?
A deal memo from Lincoln's. Ollie, you could actually publish. Zahn may just be desperate enough to cooperate.
But he wants sales figures, titles.
Ollie, my feelings for you are not dependent on your being a success, but willful failure when success is tapping you on the shoulder, that's a dumping offence.
You want me to lie, risk my job publishing from the slush pile.
The world is not going to give you permission. You have to go for it.
Richard stuffs his face with more cake, then holds out his hand to Ollie, indicating the business card.
May I?
He grips the card, but Ollie clings to it momentarily. There's a little struggle before Richard manages to retrieve it. Ollie eyes him suspiciously.
I know your game.
Richard tries to look innocent, munching cake.
What's his game?
He's absolutely desperate. He wants to move in with us.
Of course he does. I knew that already. Oh, I see. You mean that's your price for the contract at Lincoln's? Well, I never.
She looks at Richard with new admiration. Richard sucks the cake off the end of each finger, pretends to be surprised by all this vulgar talk.
I really hadn't thought about it, but it does just so happen that I haven't yet settled on lodgings.
You can have the sofa.
What?
Richard, delighted, stands and grabs his cane.
But you'll help Ollie with Zahn's book.
I don't recommend the tea here. Literally, the sweepings from one of those Chinese warehouses.
He exits.
Are you mad?
Don't worry, we'll make life very unpleasant. One Direction on repeat play, vacuuming at dawn, paprika in his tea caddy. He'll be out in a week. Just remember, I want nothing to do with Dr. Rufus Bloody Zahn.
Exterior street, London, dawn. The Stockholm, Amsterdam, London coach is on the move. Interior coach, dawn. The coach is full of young people. An attractive student sleeps with her head on the shoulder of another student. She wakes and clearly has a severely cricked neck. She sits, rubbing her neck. A large pair of masculine hands curl themselves around her head and neck. She's startled into wide-eyed paralysis, and her friend looks with alarm at the face of Dr. Zahn, who has appeared at their side. He is tanned and brimming with health, his eyes bright, and his clothes vibrant.
What's going on?
She's got a crick.
I am an osteopath of international standing. Now, just relax.
Dr. Zahn massages her neck to warm the muscle.
The muscle, here, it's guarding and shortening.
She relaxes and he expertly lays her head on its side. With an abrupt snap, he takes out the crick. Interior, Victoria Coach Station, dawn. The coach enters the terminus. Ollie is standing waiting, wrapped up against the cold. Interior coach, dawn. Dr. Zahn is smiling at the first student who gathers her things. He whispers in her ear and she blushes. She hurries to collect her stuff. Dr. Zahn is unruffled. Interior coach, Victoria Coach Station, dawn. Passengers are disembarking from the coach. Student 1 approaches the exit with Dr. Zahn following.
I assure you, up to 10 orgasms in 1 hour.
She gets off and walks away. Dr. Zahn steps down from the coach. Ollie is standing amongst the disembarking passengers.
Dr. Zahn? I'm Ollie. Welcome to London. It's really an honor and a privilege to get you here. We're really excited about the book. How was your trip?
We're going to need fresh fruit and vegetables.
Dr. Zahn walks away. Ollie follows. Exterior Broadway Market, East London, early morning. Dr. Zahn handles carrots, sniffs mangoes, and generally irritates the stall holders as he rejects everything. Ollie follows, bearing Dr. Zahn's rucksack and carrying bags of produce. Dr. Zahn spots a melon with a small hole in it. He indicates the damage to the stallholder who is dealing with a customer.
Cutworm. You can't sell this. I'll take it off your hands.
Without taking his eyes off his customer, the stallholder grabs the melon and lobs it into a bin. Dr. Zahn looks at Ollie and winks.
Free melon.
Ollie looks confused.
It's a free melon.
Ollie retrieves the melon from the bin. Dr. Zahn's attention is drawn to an attractive young woman. He is about to speak to her when Ollie appears, holding up the melon for his inspection. The woman walks away. Dr. Zahn looks irritated. Interior stairway, Ollie and Richard's flat, morning. Dr. Zahn and Ollie, loaded with bags, mount the stairs.
I knew you wouldn't want hotel food. This way we can make the best use of your time.
Dr. Zahn is unimpressed by the narrow wooden stairway. Interior, kitchen, living room, Richard and Ollie's flat, morning. Ollie and Dr. Zahn enter. Dr. Zahn takes in the borderline squalor. Ollie takes off the rucksack and unpacks the food.
This is your publishing house.
Ollie moves to the stove, sets up steamers.
We're about to move.
There's no yin force in here.
Dr. Zahn removes his trousers to reveal eccentric thermal underwear. He sits at the table.
You mentioned a partner.
Ollie exits. Interior, Richard's bedroom, continuous. Ollie enters the bedroom. He is flustered.
Richard, he's here.
Richard rolls over in bed and looks at Ollie.
I need help.
Interior, kitchen, living room, morning. Steamers are steaming away. Ollie piles a mixture of steamed veg onto a plate. He brings it to Dr. Zahn, who is looking at an invitation pulled from a pile of papers. It says, Carly, having it large. Zahn eats as he talks.
This is tonight. Good. We will attend.
Ollie freezes. He removes the invitation from Dr. Zahn's hand as politely as he possibly can.
I'm really not sure if that's your sort of thing.
Would alert the literary pages of my arrival.
Believe me, you don't want to go to this. My girlfriend is...
Sarah?
Ollie's expression gives away the fact that he is seeing Sarah.
She's with you?
He shakes his head.
A few years back, she suffered from frigidity.
Ollie is now struck dumb.
You can thank me for connecting up her circuits.
I'm sorry, what did you just say?
Are you a B male?
Ollie reaches for an answer. Zahn continues to eat greedily.
Monogamous, insecure, deprived of the health benefits enjoyed by the sexually gregarious.
He finishes his meal, leans back, expansive, in the mood to share great wisdom.
The Tao says every time you bring a woman to climax without ejaculation, you add 12 years to your life. For control, the secret is to pinch the seminal duct at the crucial moment.
Ollie is rendered silent by this. Richard enters, still half asleep and in his dressing gown.
I use a cock ring.
Dr. Zahn looks at Richard, who is surprised by this apparently isolated statement. Dr. Zahn looks at Richard as though he were a fascinating specimen. Richard holds out his hand.
Richard.
Dr. Zahn takes his hand, but instead of shaking it, he seems to be interested in its temperature. He takes Richard's other hand and stands holding them both, one in each hand, assessing their heat differential.
I never saw such an unhealthy pallor on a face. Has he recently been poisoned?
Irritated, Richard takes back his hands and walks towards a kitchenette. Dr. Zahn examines his walk critically. Ollie hovers nervously.
Tea, anyone?
What variety?
The finest Sri Lankan leaves brewed according to George Orwell's instructions.
Dr. Zahn nods quietly to himself, as though he now understands all of Richard's problems.
Orwell was dead at 46. You're horse-kicking your nervous system. It's tuckered you out.
I don't think George Orwell was killed by tea.
Look, could we talk about book?
Talk away. I have business to attend to.
Oh, right.
What business?
My business. I'll need a bicycle.
Okay, no problem.
Dr. Zahn puts his trousers on and produces a zip drive.
The final version of the book. While I'm gone, you can proof it.
But shouldn't we?
Righto, Richard is a proofreader. Was a...
Proof it on the screen. No hard copies. Paper waste is an obscenity. All waste is an obscenity.
Dr. Zahn is now ready to depart. He takes in the low-grade surroundings and Richard.
If it wasn't for this pre-order from Lincoln's, I'd be back on that bus.
We've set up a meeting with the buyer tomorrow. The deal isn't finalized.
I have final approval on everything. Content, jacket, marketing, distribution. Now, bicycle.
Interior, stairway. Ollie and Richard's building, morning. Dr. Zahn descends the stairs. Ollie follows him, but Richard waylays him.
Hey.
All right, look, you can see what he's like. We've got to handle him carefully. We don't want to provoke him.
Were you planning to just publish the book as it is?
Let's, jolly him along a bit.
Exterior, street, outside Richard and Ollie's flat, morning. Dr. Zahn is mounted on Ollie's bicycle. Ollie stands with him.
That person, what is his function exactly?
He got the deal with Lincoln's. He's got a good brain. He's his own worst enemy.
Well, that makes life easy for his real enemies.
Who are his real enemies?
All other men.
Ollie looks confused. Dr. Zahn holds out his hand and Ollie looks at it, not sure what he wants.
Oh, your key.
Ollie rummages in his bag. Under Thoreau's Walden, he finds a set of house keys. Dr. Zahn ignores the keys and picks up the book.
Thoreau. Dead at 44.
He hands back the book and takes the keys. He cycles away, watched by Ollie. Exterior, London Street, morning. As he cycles, Dr. Zahn passes an attractive woman. He pulls over but becomes dizzy. She moves to help him, but he's embarrassed and unsteadily cycles away from her. He dismounts and stands breathlessly. Exterior, street, London, day. Dr. Zahn enters the Chinese herbal medicine shop. He approaches the counter and talks to the assistant. Exterior street, outside Ollie and Richard's flat, day. Jessica approaches Richard and Ollie's building. A resident exits, so she is able to walk straight in. Interior, kitchen, living room, Richard and Ollie's flat, day. Richard is on screen, proofreading Dr. Zahn's books. A knock. He opens the door to reveal Jessica.
I'm busy.
Another monster deadline?
He starts to turn back into the room, but she stops him with her hand. She looks hard into his face. He finds her gaze disturbing and looks away. She realizes that he is genuinely sad, and when he glances at her, she sees something deeper, anger.
You blame me for the state you're in. It's radiating off you like heat.
Jess, I'm still...
What?
He shrugs her hand off and walks into the little kitchenette. He stares blankly into the sink.
When you pulled the plug, the Christmas lights went out.
I don't understand.
I'm still in love with you.
Jessica is amazed by this. She crosses the room, approaching him, then stops as the full force of what he has said hits her.
What are you talking about?
I know it's pathetic, which is why I'm trying to live quietly under my rock until the music stops.
Her tone becomes strident, warning him off from joking about something so serious.
Richard, I'm not buying it.
Richard snaps out of his dejected state. He starts preparing tea.
Well, it's not all bad. I do enjoy my tea breaks. Fancy a cup?
What about this book?
The book? Funnily enough, I was making stuff up to impress you, and it sort of became real.
It brought it back to me, why I loved you.
Richard is surprised by this revelation. He stops what he is doing. His attempt to brush off his feelings has failed. He looks at her.
I hate to see you like this.
She looks at him, but he quickly looks away.
No, look at me, Richard. I want to see it. I want to see this love in your eyes. It's mine, isn't it?
Do you realize what you could do to me? I'm little more than a pile of ash as it is.
Look at me.
He turns and directs a fiercely passionate gaze into her eyes. Richard walks over to her and kisses her passionately. We hear feet on the stairs. She struggles to get out of his arms, but the intensity overwhelms her. She allows herself to be caught up in his passion. The sound of keys in the door breaks the spell. Jessica pulls away. The door opens, revealing Dr. Zahn. Flustered, Jessica pushes past him.
Jess.
Richard follows, knocking his cane over as he exits. Interior stairway, Ollie and Richard's building, day. Richard rushes down the stairs. He slips, skids down several steps, and lands heavily on his arse. Mrs. Tidman opens her door and Pencil rushes out barking. He struggles to his feet and rushes on, dog in tow. Exterior street, outside Richard and Ollie's flat, day. Richard rushes out of the building onto the street with Pencil following. Jessica has got into a black cab. Richard runs awkwardly after the cab as it pulls away.
Jess, stop!
As the cab speeds off, Richard recklessly sprints after it before he has to stop due to his leg. He lies on the pavement, clearly in agony. Pencil licks his face madly. Interior Richard's bedroom, day. Richard limps into his bedroom. He stops on seeing Dr. Zahn lying on his back on the bed, apparently asleep. Richard takes out a prescription pill container.
This is the room of a depressed person.
Richard turns. Dr. Zahn's eyes remain shut.
The romantic lover gets trapped in his own story.
Richard is baffled by the comment.
Hey, I think I could work that into a chat outline.
Deployed in the right situation, it can be very effective. What is that bear doing in here?
Richard is not sure what he is talking about, then looks down at the polar bear rug.
My ancestors shot it in the face, so I have to drag it around till I die.
It should be given a decent burial. Wake me at 6.
Richard exits. Interior fish restaurant, night. Ollie, Richard, and Dr. Zahn are seated at a table. Dr. Zahn follows an attractive waitress with his eyes.
You okay?
Richard makes a face. He's in pain.
Maybe you could take a look at Richard's leg sometime?
I specialize in the treatment of women.
Would it help if I wore false breasts?
The waitress approaches the table and Dr. Zahn stares openly at her, examining her and savoring her good looks.
You have a slight anterior pelvic rotation.
The waitress looks at Richard and Ollie as if they might be able to explain.
Do you suffer from lower back pain?
Not really. Is everything okay? Can I get you any more drinks?
Well, fine, thank you.
An arched back is attractive in a woman, but it leads to problems later on. I wrote a book called Sexual Healing, which offers therapeutic remedies.
I'll look out for it.
She moves away and exits into the kitchen. Ollie exchanges a glance with Richard.
So, we thought, we loved the book, of course, just Love it.
Richard is frustrated with Ollie's polite reticence.
We just want to tweak it a tiny bit. I mean, only if you agree.
A flash of irritation passes across Zon's face.
Or we could just go with it as it is.
He sold it to the man from Lincoln's as an accessible guide to longevity.
Yes, that was one idea.
Richard gets down to business, plunging in.
For example, you offer dietary tips throughout. Wouldn't it be better to concentrate them into one chapter on food?
It's thought, isn't it?
Dr. Zahn seems to be barely listening. His eyes are mainly on following the waitress.
It's distracting to start talking about Brussels sprouts in the middle of a diatribe against wanking.
Great diatribe, though.
The stuff about exercise should be a separate chapter too. And all this blaming celebrity deaths on their failure to follow your teachings, it comes over as wildly arrogant.
Richard doesn't really mean that. It's just his way of talking.
Dr. Zahn reaches out and takes a waitress by the arm.
My book would interest you.
I'm sure it would, but,
I place the sexual fulfillment of women at the center of my philosophy.
well, that sounds like a very good thing, but
She tries to pull away, but he deftly takes her hand.
Please, sit a moment.
Dr. Zahn draws the waitress down into the seat next to him.
I really can't.
One moment.
He continues to hold her hand. She is clearly uncomfortable, but politeness restrains.
An experienced Taoist master can bring a woman to orgasm again and again.
The waitress now earnestly tries to repossess her hand.
I can promise you 10 orgasms in 1 hour. Think about that.
She looks at him, astonished at what he has just said, then jerks her hand away violently and walks away. There's an embarrassed silence at the table.
When she comes back, maybe try 11 orgasms?
I blame St. Augustine. He infused the subject of sex with fear and shame by equating celibacy with morality. Of course, he took care to screw every woman in 4th century Italy first.
The manager of the restaurant approaches the table.
Excuse me, I'm going to have to ask you to leave immediately.
Why?
Member of my staff has complained she was sexually harassed while serving this table.
I simply made a frank and sincere proposal.
Which was?
I invited her to have intercourse with me.
Okay, if you don't leave right now, I won't call the police.
But
Dr. Zahn is about to argue, but Ollie gets to his feet.
I'm sorry, we'll do go.
we'll need takeout cups for the soup. Waste is an obscenity.
Exterior street, outside fish restaurant, night. Ollie, Richard, and Dr. Zahn, without soup cups, exit the restaurant with the manager standing behind them.
We need to agree the changes before tomorrow's meeting.
Dr. Zahn ignores him and walks away.
What are we going to do?
Well, unless you feel like performing a flying rugby tackle, it looks like the great clunge hunt rides on.
Exterior hotel, East London, night. Ollie, Richard, and Dr. Zahn walk through a posse of paparazzi and gawpers. A celebrity is expected. Interior, function room, book launch, hotel, night. A gathering of press, minor celebrities, publishing types, and Carly fans are enjoying champagne and canapes. Copies of Carly Having It Large are displayed in cardboard cutouts of the authoress. Fee, who Richard met at the Pelican, is being signed in as a journalist by Sarah, who is stressed and harassed, undertaking last-minute preparations. Janet Webb schmoozes with publishing bigwigs, and Sir Peter, a tanned hotel tycoon. An underling speaks to Sir Peter and then speaks to Janet.
Okay, Carly splashed down in 30 seconds. Divert her straight in here. Anyone stands in your way, offer them a throat job. And stop these scumbags getting at the champagne. Beat them off with a shitty stick.
Exterior hotel night. A limousine pulls up in front of the hotel and Carly exits with her entourage. There is a frenzy of camera flashes. Interior lobby hotel night. Ollie, Richard, and Dr. Zahn wait to enter the event. Sarah sees Ollie and Richard with Dr. Zahn, who smiles at her. She ignores him and grabs Ollie. Zahn drifts across the lobby towards an attractive receptionist.
What in the hell is that sleazebomb doing here?
He thought it would be good to be seen on a literary set.
Carly sweeps into the lobby with her entourage and an aide. The paparazzi and gawpers have also poured into the lobby from the street. Sarah looks daggers at Ollie, then tries to approach Carly, but is blocked by the wave of people. Dr. Zahn turns and sees Carly approaching. He waylays her as she totters through the lobby.
You're an attractive woman.
You're not so bad yourself. Very distinguished.
I'm a world-renowned osteopath and author.
We have to go.
The attempts to brush past him, but he blocks her.
I can promise you a remarkable sexual experience, even with your breast augmentation. Up to 10 orgasms in an hour. if your implants are subglandular.
Her entourage strikes, dragging Dr. Zahn roughly aside, and she is whisked away. Sarah emerges through the throng and rushes after Carly as she heads to the lift. Interior function room, book launch, hotel night. Ollie stands with Richard and Dr. Zahn.
Your girlfriend seems uptight. That's not how I left her.
Ollie is infuriated, but when he turns, he finds that Dr. Zahn has wandered to the display of Carly's books. Janet Webb looks at her watch, then looks up and sees Dr. Zahn. She approaches him. Ollie sees what is happening.
Uh-oh, that could be bad.
Janet reaches Dr. Zahn.
I don't remember seeing your name on the guest list.
Dr. Zahn, unruffled, picks up one of the books.
This thing got any words, or is it just pictures?
It'll sell 500,000 units while you're having your prostate fingered.
You know why we never did any business, you and me?
Because you are an extinct penis? Because your book was pure batshittery?
You don't have blood running through your veins, just little polystyrene balls.
There's a commotion. To spontaneous applause, Carly enters, accompanied by Sarah. Janet clearly needs to join them.
Cause any trouble and make you eat my thumb.
Janet hurries over to welcome Carly. Dr. Zahn walks back to Richard and Ollie.
That poor woman let my book slip through her fingers.
Sir Peter takes up a microphone.
Thank you for coming. What an honour it is to hold Carly's book launch at the Regency East.
Carly looks worried. She grabs Sarah's notepad and tears off a strip of paper. She writes the words, "Am I next?" and shows Janet. Janet turns it over and writes, insert note close up. "You follow me. Will be short and sweet." Interior function room, book launch night. Janet hands a note to Carly, who reads it and scratches it up.
Believe me, it's a great read. Carly, darling, I didn't know you had it in you.
Fee recognizes Richard and walks over to him.
The man who walked away. Want to explain yourself?
How's the shoulder?
She shrugs, then winces with pain.
Now, Janet Webb of Erston Mather is going to say a very few words because she knows if she speaks after Carly, you'll all have pissed off.
There is laughter and applause.
You have a problem with your shoulder.
Fee looks across and sees Dr. Zahn.
Dr. Zahn, this is Fee.
Dr. Zahn takes her hand.
You're kidding, Dr. Zahn. Sexual healing. We had that book in the house growing up. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been publishing since 1897, but we have never had this much press at one of our launches, so we must be finally doing it right.
Sycophantic, nervous laughter.
Tell me something. Are you happy with the intensity of your orgasms?
The intensity would probably be okay if I had one. He's all small talk, isn't he? But seriously, this is an important book for us, and I'm happy to say that we will be selling signed copies today at a special price of $19.99, so please have your cash or cards ready.
Dr. Zahn still has hold of Fee's hand. He now takes her other hand and seems to test the temperature.
You may have to let go of her. It's a 21st century thing.
I can take care of myself.
Dr. Zahn uses his hand to feel the area around her ribcage under her breast.
One of your ribs is digging into the muscle here. That would explain the pain in your shoulder.
It drives me crazy.
Dr. Zahn releases her and steps back.
Think he'd treat me? He's like a world-class osteopath.
If you don't mind being mounted mid-treatment.
I said I can take care of myself. This book has broken many of our existing records with the largest single print run, the largest number of advance orders, and the largest number of male stalkers loitering outside our offices.
Laughter.
Ernst and Mather are delighted to present the author of Carly Having It Large. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome, please, for Carly.
Applause, cheers, screaming, cameras flashing as Carly takes the mic.
I'd like to thank my lovely darling of a publisher.
Applause.
Who'd have thought writing a book was such a bloody business?
Sycophantic laughter.
But seriously, I couldn't have done it without you. A few more thanks. Gordon, my publicist. Phil, my PR. Jeremy, my stylist. Rachel, my agent. I'm sure I've forgotten someone, but thank you, all you gorgeous people, for coming. Now buy my sodding book.
General laughter and applause.
I might just go for a quick tinkle, darling, and then I'll sign all the books you want.
That Tosser Zahn is here. I want you to.
A crowd surged towards them, clutching cash and credit cards.
Deal with him later.
She greedily grabs at the money and credit cards. Carly heads to the exit. She recognizes Dr. Zahn from earlier and veers towards him. She throws a little scrunched up ball of paper in his face.
filthy sod, aren't you?
Dr. Zahn picks up the ball of paper, opens it, and reads it aloud to himself, giving it a whole new meaning.
You follow me. We'll be short and sweet.
He reacts. This is clearly a come-on. Interior corridor, hotel night. Dr. Zahn sees Carly enter the ladies' toilet. Interior function room, book launch, hotel night. Ollie pushes his way through a crowd of people.
Where is he?
He's with Richard.
No, he isn't. Find him and get him out of here.
Interior toilet, hotel night. Carly is seated on the loo with her dress hiked up. She opens a silver container of white powder. Dr. Zahn enters and begins to check the cubicles. Interior corridor, hotel night. Ollie strides down the corridor with Richard limping after him. They enter the men's toilet. Interior men's toilet, hotel night. Ollie and Richard enter and find it empty. Interior ladies' toilet, hotel night. Dr. Zahn approaches the one locked cubicle. Inside, Carly has taken up a silver straw. She snorts a line. Dr. Zahn pushes his hand against the door.
Hello?
In her cubicle, Carly freezes. Dr. Zahn gets down onto his knees and then lies down. He pushes his head through the gap under the door.
There you are.
He's looking right up her skirt.
Nice chachi.
Carly is startled and spills her cocaine. Her face forms a rictus of disgust.
Fuck off out of it!
Interior men's toilet, hotel continuous. Ollie and Richard hear Carly yelling and react. They exit. Interior ladies' toilet, hotel continuous. Ollie and Richard enter. They see Dr. Zahn lying with his head under the toilet door.
Bugger off, you filthy old cunt!
Richard and Ollie drag Dr. Zahn to his feet and exit. Interior corridor, hotel continuous. Ollie and Richard rush Dr. Zahn along the corridor. They bump into Fee.
What's going on?
Emergency evacuation.
Mind if I help?
They all exit. Interior function room, book launch, hotel night. A pressing crowd of people wait for Carly's return, clutching receipts. Sarah, Janet Webb, and Sir Peter look anxious. Carly enters, harassed and angry.
There was this horrible old geezer leching at me in the bogs.
Sir Peter is horrified.
I'm so sorry, my darling. Come on, let's get you a big old drinky.
Hold it. We've sold a shitload of copies that need signing.
Sir Peter takes Carly by the arm and, apologizing profusely to her, they exit together, witnessed by the queuing people.
Can I get a refund, please? I want a signed copy.
Everyone surges towards Janet Webb, all demanding a refund and holding up their receipts. She is pushed back against the table. The display of books and the cardboard cutouts collapse.
Sarah?
We see Sarah retreating behind a big flower display. Janet looks wildly about for her.
Sarah!
She stabs at her smartphone. Sarah's smartphone starts bleeding, but she ignores it. Interior, living room kitchenette, Richard and Ollie's flat, night. Ollie is making up a cheap foam sofa bed. Richard is slumped in the armchair. We hear the low murmur of Dr. Zahn talking to Fee in Richard's bedroom.
You sure she's alright in there?
She'll fight him off.
I didn't realize Sarah meant he literally hits on every single woman he meets.
Interior Richard's bedroom, night. Fee lies face down on the bed in her jeans and bra. Dr. Zahn manipulates Fee's arm and produces a cracking sound. He indicates for her to stand.
This will realign your vertebrae.
Dr. Zahn sits on the edge of the bed, leaving enough space between his legs for her to sit facing away from him. He indicates that she should sit. He places a small pillow between his chest and her back. He shows her how to grip his wrists.
Deep breath and slow release.
Fee breathes in, and as she exhales, he squeezes her whole upper body. Her spine cracks.
Wow, it felt amazing.
He continues to hold her in his grip.
You know what would really uncoil the tension?
Fee rolls her eyes. She knows what's coming.
Long, hot bath.
He releases her and starts to massage her neck.
You need release from the intellectual plane.
But I love the intellectual plane. It's where I built my hypothetical house.
He continues to massage her, working his way down.
I'm talking about full immersion in a completely sensual...
He unclips her bra. Her hand moves like lightning to reclip it.
Try to relax. You haven't had sex in a long time.
Well, you're right about that.
She puts her top and jacket on.
But with all due respect, when I do have sex, it's going to be with someone who, age-wise, is in the same ballpark as me. Or at least the same postal district.
I can guarantee...
Look, nice try and everything, but I'm going to say no. You got that clear now?
She walks towards the door but pauses before exiting.
Find yourself a nice, warm grandmother.
She exits. Still seated on the bed, Dr. Zahn looks into the wonky old eyes of the polar bear. He is hit by an upsurge of frustration and kicks out at a chest of drawers, hurting his foot. Interior, corridor, living room, kitchen at night. Fee comes out of Richard's bedroom and walks towards the exit. She spies Richard lying on the sofa bed.
A night. Hey, you never told me why you walked away that time.
I just couldn't handle the sheer scale of fun we were having.
Oh yeah, nothing to do with the blonde of the water?
Richard produces a regretful smile of someone who has been seen through.
You're all fucked up, aren't you? All the best people are. I used to be in love with a musician. Now I've got a hole in me the size of a grand piano.
She takes a card out of her bag. She places one on the side table and exits. Interior, living room, kitchen at dawn. Richard is asleep on the sofa bed. He opens his eyes, sensing someone is there. From his sleepy POV, we see Dr. Zahn in a kimono, seated at the table, eating cold, steamed vegetables. Richard observes him for a moment.
Morning.
Dr. Zahn nods.
Didn't you ever get trapped by your own story?
There was a girl in Munich on the book tour, Larissa, double-jointed. I got hung up on her for a few days. You know why I only treat women?
I could take a wild guess.
Many of my patients become lovers, it's true. But if I cure a man, he becomes a rival.
Dr. Zahn stands and suddenly pulls back Richard's covers to reveal his pale body in boxer briefs. Dr. Zahn starts rubbing his hands together to warm them.
What are you doing?
I'm going to examine you.
Richard hesitates for a moment, then slowly and stiffly gets to his feet. Dr. Zahn turns on the light.
Let's get something straight. I'm not going to sleep with you.
Okay, turn away from me.
Dr. Zahn examines a configuration of Richard's bones, frowning and concentrating hard.
Now, touch your toes.
Richard stiffly leans over and tries to touch his toes. Dr. Zahn is frowning, concentrating. Richard straightens up.
Lie on your front.
Richard lies, and Dr. Zahn massages his back.
Pain is connected to emotion. Was there some psychological trauma that you suffered at the same time as your accident?
How did you know about the accident?
Turn over.
Guiding with his hands, he gets Richard to turn over onto his side, lays his left thigh over his right leg, and holding his shoulder with one hand, he pushes upwards on his thigh joint. It makes an almost imperceptible cracking sound. Dr. Zahn stands up.
That's it?
Have sex with someone. It's therapeutic.
The session is over.
I thought you didn't treat men.
Waste is an obscenity.
He exits. Interior, kitchen, living room, morning. Ollie shakes Richard awake.
I can't wake him.
Richard gets stiffly to his feet. They both exit. Interior, corridor, continuous. Richard raps on the door of his bedroom. Ollie stands behind him.
Dr. Zahn.
No answer. They both enter. Interior, Richard's bedroom, continuous. The bed is empty. Dr. Zahn's possessions have gone. On the bedspread is a still life photograph of a brown bowl next to an iris. Ollie picks up the photograph and Richard picks up a note which lies beside it.
This is the cover for the Art of Longevity. I trust you will deliver my ideas faithfully to the reading public.
Richard takes the photograph from Ollie and looks at the caption which says, Raku Bowl and Iris, copyright Dr. Rufus Zahn, 1987.
We're crucified.
Just be there at 11. Let me do the talking. And don't, for Christ's sake, pull any stunts with Jessica.
Interior bullpens, Ernst and Mather, morning. Ollie is seated at his desk reading about Raku pottery on the internet. Interior toilet, Ernst and Mather, morning. Ollie is washing his hands. He hears the sounds of someone entering the office. Interior bullpens, Ernst and Mather, morning. Ollie re-enters the office. Sarah is standing waiting for him, his arms folded, angry.
Janet found out about Zahn's book. You got quotes from our printers.
The whole thing's falling apart.
This throws her. She is suddenly more concerned.
What do you mean?
Zahn's vanished. He's completely nuts anyway. He's insisting we put a ball on the cover.
Ollie, I think they're going to fire you on Monday.
Now it's Ollie's turn to be angry.
Great. Thanks.
It's not my fault. This was your idea.
No, it was not my idea. It was Richard's idea. But you know what? I believed in it. The environmental stuff, the health stuff, the not living like this. But you made it into this test.
I thought it would make you happier to do something for yourself.
Well, it hasn't. It's just been a big shit sandwich.
He told you, didn't he? Zahn told you that he slept with me.
He used a sledgehammer to hint at it.
Ollie, it was 5 years ago.
She tries to touch him, but he pulls away.
He went on and on at me, working on all my insecurities.
Look, I have to go.
Ollie,
I'm late. I've lost my job. I'd better publish the fucking thing.
Exterior street outside Nick and Jessica's house day. Richard approaches a smart-looking townhouse using his walking cane. He seems unsure about his leg, as though he can't decide if it feels better or not. He walks up to the front door and is about to knock when Jessica opens the door.
Come in quickly.
He enters. Interior hallway, Nick and Jessica's house day. Richard enters and Jessica closes the door.
Come in here a moment.
She indicates the door and he walks through. Interior, living room hallway, Nick and Jessica's house day. Richard and Jessica enter this immaculate interior. As she turns to him, he kisses her on the mouth. His stick falls to the floor. Now we see that a small boy, 3-year-old Felix, has tottered into the doorway where he watches them while eating a chocolate biscuit. Jessica vigorously struggles out of Richard's embrace.
Richard, no, stop it.
He tries again, but she pushes him away forcefully.
I mean it.
Jess, I'm...
Richard, I'm sorry. The other day I was upset and I forgot myself. It was a stupid mistake.
No, wait.
A very stupid mistake because I encouraged your profound illusions.
Richard is shocked into silence.
Okay, look, you need to hear this. What you feel for me is not love. Loving someone like that for years without seeing them, that is not love. That is, I'm sorry, that is borderline mental illness. You do not have any chance of getting together with me. Do you understand? I'm happy with my husband.
The doorbell rings and Jessica turns to the door, immediately seeing Felix.
Come on, sweetheart, help mommy. Answer the door.
She takes his hand and walks with him to the front door. She opens it to reveal Ollie.
Hello, you must be Ollie. I'm Jessica.
They shake hands. Richard enters the hallway. Ollie sees he has a lipstick on his face and that Jessica's lipstick is smeared.
You'll find Nick in the kitchen.
Ollie looks daggers at Richard. Interior toilet, Jessica and Nick's house day. Jessica uses toilet paper to deftly wipe Richard's face. Felix stands with them, watching Richard.
Come on, pull your socks up.
She wipes the chocolate off Felix's face. Interior kitchen, Jessica and Nick's house day. Nick is seated at the kitchen table, feeding another boy, Oscar, age 2. Ollie leans against a sideboard. Jessica and Felix enter with a traumatized Richard.
Hello, Richard. This is Oscar. I see you've met Felix. Did Jessica tell you we've put in an offer on your flat? Of course, your place is in Hoxton Square, isn't it? So you're laughing, you lucky bugger.
Richard hasn't got a place.
He trails off. There is an embarrassed silence.
All right. Well, shall we make a start? I'm disappointed not to meet the author, but Ollie has explained about his crisis.
Jessica takes over feeding Oscar and Ollie sits. Richard stands looking stunned. Jessica glances anxiously at him.
Richard, sit down!
Richard sits. Nick decides to proceed.
To get straight to the point, and this is more because of my old friendship with Richard than anything else.
He takes the letter from a document holder.
I've drawn up a statement of interest. It's the sort of thing a bank manager will recognize as having some value.
Richard makes a sound of faint groan.
Are you all right?
Richard looks at Nick as though seeing him for the first time.
Could I get a cup of tea?
Not now, Richard.
Sorry, I should have offered. Ollie, what we got?
Nothing, thanks, and Richard really doesn't need tea.
Actually, I need one very badly.
Nick is slightly perplexed by this, but he stands and puts on the kettle.
He'll just have it normal. Look, I want to propose a concept for the book's jacket.
Ollie takes out an envelope.
The tea itself should be Indian or Sri Lankan, or a china or earthenware teapot is preferable.
Richard, no.
Nick looks surprised, glancing between Ollie and Richard. Jessica looks anxiously at Richard. Ollie tries to pretend everything is okay by smiling.
Up on the right, darling, the tin caddy.
After a moment's hesitation, Nick takes down the caddy.
You were saying a new concept.
We've come up with something that will make the book an enduring classic.
I'm all ears.
Nick is about to spoon the tea into a small teapot.
The pot should be first warmed by placing it on the hob.
Nick's hand freezes. Ollie walks over to Richard and talks to him with quiet intensity.
Richard, will you forget about your fucking tea?
Jessica bites her lip with anxiety. She stands and takes Nick's place, putting the teapot on the hob.
I'll do it.
We've managed to get hold of a stunning vintage photograph. I'm going to throw a word at you, and the word is raku.
Not familiar.
It means pleasure, enjoyment, contentment. This book is about long life achieved through a lifestyle that is above all rewarding and enjoyable. Just as vases produced by the raku masters reward those who behold them with profound joy.
The kettle boils and Jessica spoons the tea into the warm teapot before pouring in the boiled water.
So, we're talking pottery.
Dr. Zons believes that at the height of a passion, a man must withdraw, just as in the raku process, The glowing vase is taken from the furnace and plunged into the cooling barrel of leaves. We propose, for the cover, this stunning photograph of a raku bowl and an iris.
He presents the photograph with a flourish.
What does the iris represent?
The iris is just pretty.
A moment's silence as Nick takes this all in. Jessica places the teapot in front of Richard with a cup, a spoon, and a little jug of milk.
I have to say, for me, the bowl is a turn-off.
But the art of longevity and this photograph are inseparable.
I thought it was called Live Longest.
Tear them apart and you tear apart the very fabric of Dr. Zahn's philosophy. I, for one, will be forced to retreat to the West Country.
Nick frowns at him. There is a deep silence.
You boys are winding me up, right? Sweetheart, what's going on?
Richard takes the lid off the teapot and starts to noisily stir the tea.
It's a lovely spot, down near Taunton, by a pond. It's the raku bowl or I become a pond dweller.
Utterly baffled, Nick can think of nothing to say. Richard continues to noisily stir his tea. Ollie turns furiously to him and forces a spoon out of the pot and puts the lid back on.
Just leave it! Leave it!
Ollie attempts to take the teapot away from Richard, but he clings to it. It wavers around, dripping tea on the table. For a moment, it looks like it might fly loose.
Could you just...
Richard is upset.
Why is Richard upset?
Ollie releases the teapot and points at Jessica.
Because he's in love with her!
Nick follows his finger and looks at Jessica, baffled,
Okay, look.
putting the letter in his folder.
Thanks for dropping by and everything, but we have things to do.
Ollie sees the letter go back in the folder, horrified. The room is filled with the tinkle-tinkle sound of tea being poured. Ollie turns and sees Richard filling his cup. Furious, he sweeps the teapot out of Richard's hand. It flies through the air and smashes against a cupboard like a bomb. The shock of this sets both children off, crying.
You bastard!
He flings himself at Ollie and they fall to the ground. They fight furiously and get several good punches in. Chairs are knocked over and a small table with a fruit bowl and precious objet d'art crashes to the floor. Exterior street outside Nick and Jessica's house, day. Ollie and Richard, with fresh cuts and bruises, are pushed violently out of the house by Nick, who then throws Richard's stick out after them. We hear the children still crying. Jessica stands behind him as he slams the door.
What's been going on with you and Richard?
Their furious argument fades away. Ollie walks off, leaving Richard on his own.
Arsehole!
Ollie returns, picks up the stick, lays it across the steps, and snaps it in half with his foot. Interior, bullpens, Ernst and Mather, day. Ollie, his face bruised and cut, puts his few possessions into a box. He turns and looks across to Sarah's office. Sarah sits at her desk and looks back at him. She stands and closes the door. Interior, Richard's bedroom, Richard and Ollie's flat, day. Richard, with a black eye and other cuts and bruises, lies on his bed, staring into space. Ollie passes his open door without glancing at Richard. We hear the front door open and slam as Ollie exits. Richard sits up and looks at his room, finds himself staring at the ratty old polar bear. He gets up and folds it into a bundle. Interior, kitchen, living room, Richard and Ollie's flat, morning. Richard and Ollie prepare breakfast, their cuts and bruises an awkward reminder of their fight. Ollie sees his houseplant is dead. He exits with his food. In the little corridor, he sees that Richard's polar bear rug is in a black bin liner by the door. Interior, Richard's bedroom, Richard and Ollie's flat, day. Richard sits on the edge of his bed, feeling his black eye, at a complete loss as to what to do. He walks over to a drawer and opens it. He takes out a business card. It reads, Fiona MacDonald, journalist. Interior, Pelican Bar, evening. Richard and Fee are having a drink and getting on well. He has smartened himself up and got rid of the stick. She examines his bruised face and giggles. Interior, Richard's bedroom, Richard and Ollie's flat, night. Richard and Fee are having sex. They reach a cathartic climax, which clearly does them both a world of good. Interior, living room, kitchenette, Richard and Ollie's flat, morning. Richard enters in his dressing gown to find Ollie sitting and working at the computer. Both are still bruised and cut.
The National Geographic called.
Ollie doesn't take the bait.
They want total Y-front access for their pubic lice special.
Your friend's offer on the flat was accepted.
Richard is silent.
We're out. I'm sorry, Richard, but it's like you're a broken branch and I'm just holding you up. The branch never heals it.
He stops on hearing a sound from next door.
What's going on in your room? I heard weird sounds last night.
He stops on having a sudden realization.
You've got someone in there.
Ollie takes a moment to absorb this information. He is delighted.
You're still planning to publish the book?
It's being printed tonight.
Tonight? What are you talking about?
The printer's had a cancellation. I'm getting a huge discount. Midnight, the presses start rolling.
Jesus, can I help?
Are you kidding?
Richard is not sure what he means.
Of course you can help. I'm in a complete bloody panic. I haven't finished the layout. We'll need another proof. I'm going to be running back and forth to the internet cafe like a blue-arsed fly.
But this is bonkers. Ollie, we can't do it all on time.
It was bonkers, but with you, I think we might have a chance.
Interior, living room, kitchenette, Richard and Ollie's flat, day, montage sequence. Ollie and Richard sit side by side, working their way through Zahn's book, cutting and pasting sections, creating chapter titles, etc. At first, Ollie is in charge, but Richard increasingly takes over. Richard proofreads the manuscript on screen. Richard closes the manuscript and takes out the zip drive. He hands it to Ollie, who rushes out. Interior, internet cafe, desk. Ollie hesitates. He has an email with the attachment called The Art of Longevity. In the address bar is atticusprint@googlemail.com. He presses send. Interior, Richard's bedroom, Richard and Ollie's flat, evening. Richard and Fee are having happy sex. They roll around, thoroughly enjoying themselves. Fee flings her arms out and knocks Richard's precious cup off the bedside table. It smashes. Richard rolls over and looks at it. He picks up the pieces.
Was it precious?
Richard seems to snap out of his reverie.
No, it's nothing.
He tosses the pieces into his bin. Interior pub, evening. Richard and Fee are together in a corner banquette.
Are you okay? You seem a bit...
This book, Zahn's book, it's got crockery on the cover.
I don't want to say anything.
What would you put on there?
Zen with bimbos, obviously.
Really?
Sure. Too late now, though. I'm getting out of here. Going to work for my uncle's lettings agency in Kidderminster.
Is that some sort of modern urban code for committing suicide?
I'm serious. You're my last fling before I quit London.
Interior, living room, kitchenette, Richard and Ollie's flat, night. Richard and Fee enter the apartment. They are met by a terrible sight. Ollie has printed off countless sheets of paper which lie on every surface. There are red scribbles on many of the pages. Ollie is deranged with grief.
What's going on?
Ollie thrusts a copy of the title page at him. He looks at it and we see The Art of Longevity.
Why is that extra of still there?
Ollie again doesn't answer but hands him another sheet.
That shouldn't be there. Why is that there?
Ollie starts flinging sheets of paper marked with typos.
Ollie, how did this happen?
It's you. You've cocked up the proofreading.
But I changed all the...
You put the wrong version on the zip drive.
We've got to get...
The internet cafe is closed.
Stop the printers, call them!
They're not answering.
Richard realizes they are screwed.
This is because of that lunatic.
No, it's you. This is you.
He made me promise I'd proof it on screen. It's sacred to the art of proofreading that you print a hard copy.
If it's sacred, why did you let a man whose brain has been enfeebled by continuous fucking for half a century talk you into not printing a hard copy?
You admit he's a lunatic.
Of course he's a lunatic. The book's got a bowl on the cover.
Ollie is prostrate with grief.
The Art of Longevity, the book with all the errors.
Fee exits the bathroom and starts listening to their despairing conversation.
It's a complete non-success.
Non-success? Come on, I don't think we should be afraid of the word failure.
Right. Total failure.
It's me though, isn't it? I have failed. It's healthy to just come out and say it.
We failed. I played my part.
That's good of you, but principally the failure is mine.
If you insist.
And when I marry it up with all my other failures, it's quite something, isn't it?
Can I just ask what exactly is going on here?
There is a pause as Ollie and Richard each wait for the other to explain.
Richard has totally arsed up proofreading.
Fee looks at her watch, which reads 10:58.
Alright, so you've got an hour.
You can't proof a book and transport it across London in an hour.
No, but you could get over to the printers and explain the situation.
Interior stairway, Richard and Ollie's building, night. Richard, Ollie rush down the stairs. They pass Pencil, the dachshund, sitting outside its owner's closed door. Exterior street, outside Richard and Ollie's building, night. Ollie and Richard try to hail a taxi. Its light is off and Ollie is almost run over. Ollie approaches the door, which is opened by Fee, who is departing. He enters as she exits.
Good luck, I'm going home.
She approaches a bicycle that is locked to a lamppost. Ollie brings his bike out onto the street and shuts the door. Richard climbs onto the handlebars. Google mapping on his phone, Ollie starts cycling. They noticed for the first time that Pencil is with them. Ollie gets off and picks Pencil up.
Give me your keys.
I haven't got them.
Richard swears. He rushes over to the apartment door and presses the buzzer. There is no answer.
Fee?
She's gone. Richard takes out his phone.
We haven't got time!
Exterior urban freeway night, traveling. Ollie, like a man possessed, pedals crazily with Richard perched on the handlebars and Pencil having the ride of his life in the basket, his ears flapping in the wind. A car passes and beeps its horn. Exterior printworks night. Ollie steers towards a modern building in an industrial estate. Richard dismounts with Pencil. Ollie collapses. Richard begins to bang and shout on the doors.
Hello? Anyone there?
In an upstairs window, we see a printer, a world-weary man, looking down at Richard prancing about. Interior printworks, night through to dawn montage. While the printer stands impatiently behind him, Richard sits at a computer, changing the typing errors. Ollie is slumped in a chair, referring to the print-off with its red markings, calling the changes out. Pencil sleeps at their feet. Richard alters the last typo and then remembers something. He shifts to the first page of the manuscript and writes, "For Larissa." Pages of the book begin to run off the presses. Richard watches, fascinated. Print workers box up the copies of the book. Richard opens one and inhales the scent of his new baby. Interior stairway. Richard and Ollie's building, morning. Carrying bags with books in them, Ollie and Richard stand outside Mrs. Tidman's door. She opens it.
We forgot our keys. Can we have our spare?
I'll get it. Listen, do you want the dog?
Interior, living room, kitchenette. Richard and Ollie's flat, morning. Richard and Ollie enter. They carry bags with books in them. Ollie presses play on the answer phone.
This is the Charing Cross Hospital. We have a gentleman here, Rufus Zahn, taken poorly at Victoria Bus Station. Gave this as a contact number.
Interior corridor, hospital, day. The matron walks with Ollie and Richard.
He has a valve in his heart, which is a wee bit leaky. It's a condition that can be controlled perfectly well with the proper medication. He's not had a single visitor till now, poor lamb.
Interior room, hospital, day. Dr. Zahn is on his side in bed in a deep funk. He doesn't glance at the pretty nurse checking his drip. Ollie and Richard approach the bed.
Dr. Zahn, it's us. Simon and Schuster.
There is a flicker in Zahn's eyes.
You should have told us you were ill. Why did you go off like that?
Dr. Zahn manages a croaking sound that comes from a deep chasm of despair.
We published your book.
Richard takes a copy of the book out of his bag and hands it to Dr. Zahn, whose eyes light up. Dr. Zahn holds a book in his hands. He is pleased. He sits up to take a proper look. He opens the book and sees these words, "For Larissa." His face melts into a smile. He shows the nurse.
My latest book. It's a guide to retaining peak sexual virility.
She seems a bit alarmed. Ollie is exasperated.
I myself can bring a woman to orgasm again and again, up to 10 orgasms.
Would you please cut that out? I'm sorry.
Not himself.
No, that's not the problem at all.
She exits. Dr. Zahn sits up more and seems energized.
So, are they already in this shop, Lincoln's?
That deal fell through. The man from Lincoln's didn't go for it.
Dr. Zahn looks disappointed.
The man from Lincoln's does not know his business.
He flips through the book.
There's a lifetime of wisdom in here. The world needs this book.
Ollie is starting to get fed up.
There should be a copy in every home.
Jesus Christ, I've heard about writer's ego, but this is off the scale.
Ollie.
For God's sakes, this is bullshit. A health guide to longevity by an extremely unwell sex pest?
Show some respect for the author. He's the only one we've got.
It's okay. I know what this is about. He's angry because a few years ago I had the audacity to make love to his girlfriend.
No.
I had the bad taste to be old when I did it.
I'm angry because other people exist for you for only two reasons. To fuck them or for them to publish your fucking books.
Shocked silence all round. Dr. Zahn lays the book on the side table.
I report from the edge of experience. This is where you find wisdom.
That is where you find poontang in your 80s.
What can I tell you? I never became gripped by ordinary life. I get my fix. I keep moving. The ice goes on forever.
Great. We've just published a book full of your advice.
An achievement of which you should be proud.
But now you're saying this leads to loneliness.
You think I'm lonely? Maybe I'm not like you. You ever think of that possibility? This is a book that has not been written by committee. It has not had every edge hacked off by unimaginative, greedy executives. Come on. What is our strategy? How do we sell this extraordinary book?
Silence.
I think we've got a big problem with the cover.
Japanese Reiku pottery is a passion of mine.
But nobody else's.
What do you suggest?
Fi had an idea. A sort of tongue-in-cheek thing. You know, you on the cover with a couple of glamour models?
Such an image would be an aid to masturbation. But if this is what it takes, then we do it.
What do you mean we do it?
We do it.
But the book's already got a cover.
Do a jacket. Set it up.
Fi did say she'd help.
Ollie looks at him as if he was mad.
What are you talking about? We can't do a photo shoot now.
I'm fine.
They look at him.
I just have to thin the blood. I'll be fine.
Interior changing room photographer studio day. Dr. Zahn is seated at a mirror while a makeup artist touches up his face. He wears a white suit. On either side of him, two glamour models with orange tans and bikinis are applying their own makeup. One of them, Linda, looks a little hippie-ish and flaky and is covering up her yin-yang tattoo with body makeup. Richard sits at the other side of the room waiting.
You girls should buy my new book. It would transform your sex life.
Don't you worry about my sex life, Grandpa.
I practice techniques that make sex an energizing experience and offers women more intense, more frequent orgasms.
Model 1 laughs, stands up and exits. But Linda seems interested.
Are you talking about tantric sex?
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Linda exits. Richard approaches Dr. Zahn with a copy of the book and a pen.
You're looser in your limbs.
Richard smiles. He opens the book and gives the pen to Dr. Zahn.
Would you?
You've been having intercourse.
Dr. Zahn writes to Richard, whose story has just begun.
It was Fi, the one whose shoulder you fixed.
You see, I cure a man, I create a rival.
Why did you treat me?
It was a moment of weakness, and one which I regret.
Richard smiles. Dr. Zahn walks towards the exit.
Dr. Zahn,
He turns and looks at Richard.
thanks.
He exits. Richard follows him out. The makeup artist is putting her things away. She knocks Dr. Zahn's rucksack over. Several paper packages containing conventional medications spill out onto the table. They are sealed and unopened. He has not been taking his medication. Interior photographer studio day. Richard and Dr. Zahn enter the studio. Dr. Zahn takes up his position between Linda and Model 1. The photographer moves into position. Dr. Zahn's hands hover over curvaceous thighs. His eyes twinkle. The models start throwing classic, trashy poses. Linda whispers in Dr. Zahn's ears, and Dr. Zahn smiles. We home in on the camera lens. We home in on Dr. Zahn's smile. A drip of sweat runs down his face. Suddenly, the photographer looks shocked. Linda lets out a cry of alarm. Dr. Zahn has fallen to the floor. He is dead. Exterior. Crematorium Chapel Day. A blustery day. A modern chapel surrounded by memorial tablets and headstones. People, some old, some young, and some clearly quite eccentric, are walking towards the chapel. Ollie, Sarah, and Richard among them. Ollie and Richard's cuts and bruises have almost completely healed. A sheet of newspaper blows momentarily onto a headstone. We read the headline, Long Life Book Launch Kills Author, and the subheading, Sexual Healing Author Finds His Own Medicine Too Rich at Steamy Photo Shoot. The article is illustrated with a headshot of Dr. Zahn from the 1980s. The paper blows away. Interior Crematorium Chapel Day. Richard, Ollie, and Sarah sit at the front. A colorful gathering of people fill the pews. The priest finishes his peroration and glances behind him. He looks over at Ollie and Richard, who smile apologetically. We now see the coffin. Draped over the top is Richard's polar bear rug. The priest presses a button and the coffin begins to glide into the crematorium oven, the snarling, mangy head of the polar bear bravely facing the hereafter. Exterior Chapel Crematorium Day. People are leaving. though some linger in groups. Ollie and Sarah stand apart, waiting. Richard approaches Sarah and Ollie, but is waylaid by a group of people. A wispy-haired old man in a caftan, a Chinese couple, 3 students.
Do you know anything about the book Dr. Zahn published before he died?
Richard stops.
It's not on Amazon or anything. It's called The Art of Longevity.
Richard takes a copy of The Art of Longevity out of his bag. It is subtitled, How to Outlive Your Wife and Have the Last Laugh. The jacket features Dr. Zahn grinning happily with the 2 glamour models.
I published it.
They all look pleased to have found him.
How do I get a copy?
They gather around Richard. Others walk over. Ollie and Sarah stand thoughtfully. The atmosphere between them is awkward.
I've been such an idiot, thinking I could go off and live by a pond.
Why shouldn't you go and live by a pond?
I'm too easily influenced. Only an idiot reads Thoreau and actually lives by a pond.
So who are you going to be influenced by? Thoreau or Dr. Zahn? Or Dr. Seuss? Or maybe the Wizard of Oz? What do you want?
I want to feel connected to nature. I want to live where honesty is a virtue, not weakness.
But what would you do?
Learn about copsing and tree surgery, raise free-range ducks.
All right. Good. Then give it a try.
Ollie thinks for a beat, then seems resolved and happy. He looks at Sarah and sees that she has tears in her eyes.
But please take me with you.
Ollie is speechless.
I've got to get out of here, Ollie. I hate what I'm becoming. I used to be quite a sweet person.
Sarah, there isn't one aspect of it that would appeal to you.
Yes, there is. There's you.
He is touched by what she has said. He walks up to her and puts his arms around her.
You'd be bored and uncomfortable.
I always wanted to be a writer, but I could never think of anything to write about. But this, can you imagine? The worst, most miserable days will make the best reading.
You're really saying you'd give up everything here?
She smiles and nods. Her mobile starts to bleed in her pocket. She reaches for it, but Ollie gets to it first. He pulls it out of her bag and makes to fling it towards some bushes. Sarah grapples with him, but she starts laughing, and he manages to throw it. It flies high into the air and morphs into... Exterior, Loch Day. A skylark hangs in the air, trilling its song. Peaceful water on a hazy summer's day. Richard, in swimming shorts, stands at the landward end of a long jetty, staring contemplatively at the water. Exterior pond, West Country day. Ollie tends an organic duck pond in a beautiful setting. Sarah smiles at him from the entrance to an eccentric shack. Behind her, we see a laptop glowing. Exterior Loch Day. Richard has a bicycle lying on its side by the jetty. His clothes lie next to it. Fee cycles up to join him. There is a dachshund, Pencil, in the basket. She proffers a cell phone to Richard as Pencil hops out.
There was a call for you. London Review of Books, doing a piece on cult publishing.
Richard turns and gives her a look.
It's not a joke. Sod it. Deal with it when we get back.
She takes off her top to reveal a swimsuit underneath. Richard runs down the jetty, followed by Fee and Pencil. They all 3 launch themselves into the air. End.